Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. Today we have something a little outside our typical focus area, but I think some of you are going to find value in the discussion with my guest, Shiloh Minor, so I wanted to share her expertise with you. So Shiloh is happily married, wife and mother of 2 boys, and she lives in rural Nova Scotia. She's a love and marriage coach for women who want to create passionate marriage with a man they've already chosen. And she helps women learn how to get their needs met, fall back in love, and bring out the best in their man. That's a tall order, so let's dig in there. So first, let me say thank you for taking the time to talk with me today, and I would love it if you could sort of bring the listeners up to speed with how you got into the coaching space for love and marriage and relationships.
Thank you so much for having me. First of all, you have the perfect voice for podcasting. I'm like mesmerized.
Oh,
It's so good. Okay, so how did I get into this space? So I'm going to go way back, but I won't take the whole story. I have been fascinated with relationships since I was very young. When I was a teenager, I used to go around quizzing people, like, how did you know your person was your person? And people who were divorced, I would ask them why. I was meddling. I needed to know.
I love that so much.
Yeah. And it was because I was eager to have an amazing marriage. And it was obvious to me that people did not have them. Like, I was looking for the models. I was like, where is this marriage that I want to have? Because is it possible? Am I in fantasy land? Because I found that there was kind of 2 schools of thought. One was, that's not how marriage is. Like, just get over it. You're immature. And other people who are like, no, like, you can have that. I didn't, but you can. And I'm like, okay, who has it, right? And my mother was kind of one of these early self-help people. So she had all kinds of different books, how to be your own best friend and, emotional stuff that I started reading very young. And then, I went through my 20s and I didn't find my person. And then when I was almost 30, I met my now husband and immediately connected with him. Thought, this guy's amazing. He's intelligent, he's kind, he's good looking. It's going to be awesome. And, soon after getting married, we were bickering a lot, right? Because I had learned that you should speak up for yourself, right? You should. Don't be a doormat. Communicate. We were bickering all the time. And then we had kids and things went black. It just went from not so good to awful because I was exhausted. I was trying to get my needs met from him. And he was becoming more and more distant, more and more cold, more and more grumpy. And I was absolutely at my wit's end. And I was sitting there going, I have read more books on relationship than most people I know. My husband is a good man, so I can't put it off on him having some egregious problems. But this is not working. I can't do this. And I was becoming very impatient with my toddlers. And so I finally just said to my husband, look, I need some help. I need to talk to somebody. And I hired a parent coach who introduced me to self-responsibility, that I was not a victim, that I had a choice about my feelings, that I had a choice about all of it. And it absolutely changed my life and opened my eyes. And I went, wow, this husband is not treating me some kind of way. I'm creating a dynamic with him that is not serving me. And so I started reversing that dynamic and, trying all these different tools. And I did a lot more research into maybe there's more out there than what I read in the conventional books. And there is. And I turned around my marriage and I made it better than what it was before we had kids. You know what I mean? It wasn't like it just went back to that. It got better than that. And as soon as I did that, I went, this has got to be pretty much every woman I know, because we didn't have an excuse to have problems. There was no drugs. There was no infidelity. There was no, mental health issues, just normal childhood trauma, the usual stuff. And so I thought, it's no wonder marriage doesn't work. Nobody has told us how to do it. The advice out there it's not all garbage, but it's so limited. It's given in a way that is very hard to receive and implement immediately. And so I went about figuring out what it would look like for me to help other women. And as soon as I started doing it, I knew I had found like my vocation in the world immediately. And since then, it's just been better and better, more women and more reach and people coming and saying like, oh, I would have gotten divorced if I hadn't spoken to you, that type of thing. And so, yeah, that's how it all came about. And I just feel like all those books I read and all those people I talked to when I was younger, it's all coming full circle now.
That's what I was actually going to jump in and say is that I love the stories where we hear about something in our childhood or our upbringing. The signs were there. I mean, when you tell the story about who you were as a child, you were this. You were a child version of this. So it's crazy to me that we often put it aside and forget it. And then somehow, like you said, it comes full circle and we lean back into it. And that's where we find our best self. It's just such a fascinating thing that I'm seeing with so many women. So congratulations for finding that thing and then being able to use it to be of service to other people, because I'm sure it's making a big difference. So before we really dig in, I want to recap something we talked about on a discovery call and just kind of call it out. So a lot of the people in my community are in very long-lasting marriages. So, some of them may hear this right off the bat and think, well, this isn't for me because, I've been married for 25, 30 years, whatever. I guess I just want to say where you and I came to the conclusion was that that's okay because we both know that you can always bring it up to another level. You can always change up the communication. You can always find a heightened level of all those things that sort of bring you to a place of being in a much better playing field in that marriage space and just really being happy in it, not just in it, but really being fulfilled and happy in it. So I think it's worth even those people that have been in long-term marriages to sort of listen to some of the thoughts that we're going to talk about. So the first thing I was going to ask you about was one of the fundamental talk tracks that you have, and it's around learning communication styles and how they differ for men and women. And I just wanted to ask you to give us a couple of thoughts on why understanding those differences is so critical to really learning to communicate properly or well. I don't know if properly is the right word, but well with your spouse.
Communication is something that we do instinctually. So when we are communicating, it's just flowing out. It's just happening the way we do it. So we figure we're probably doing it right, especially if we're not really mad or we're not really triggered, like this is fine. And when you said properly, the word I like to use is effectively.
Yes.
If your message is not landing and if you're not getting the results you want, it's not that you're bad or wrong. You're just using your instincts and they're not working, right? And so one of the ways I talk about is that, when me and you talk or when women talk, we ask a lot of questions. We ask follow-up questions. We interject, like you'll go, yeah, that one, and I'll say totally. And those are called encouragers. It's a way that we make it very clear we're listening. And we do this like lots of words, lots of gestures, lots of flow back and forth. It's kind of like ping pong. It's going back and forth all the time, right? There's not a lot of silence. There's not one person monologuing for an hour. It's this really, really quick back and forth. And it can go on for hours. And we can be satisfied and nourished by it going on for hours, right? One of the ways that's really critical is that we care for each other is we ask deep questions. We say, how are you? Like, really, how are you? And how are you feeling? And we go, oh, thank God I've got a girlfriend who asks me these things. We feel so known, right? So that would be like archetypal feminine communication. Now, men, on the other hand, when they get together, unless they are like brothers, even if they are brothers, they don't ask, how are you feeling? That question is actually considered disrespectful. It's like a prying question. Don't go digging in there. If I wanted to tell you, I would. So they have an assumption that, say your buddy's going through a divorce, right? We had a girlfriend going through a divorce. We're like, oh my God, how's the divorce? Give me all the things. Load me up, right? A man might have a friend going through a divorce, and when he sees him, he doesn't even mention the topic. And he does that out of respect.
Wait, I have to tell you, I'm trying not to laugh because I'm thinking of so many times I said to my husband, like he'll come back from being with so-and-so friend and I'd be like, did you ask him about blah, blah? Just, interject whatever the situation. And he'll be like, no, I didn't even think to ask him about that. I'm like, what do you mean you didn't think to ask him? You were with him for 4 hours.
Yeah.
But he didn't think to ask him.
Yes. And it's because they don't connect by going into the deep emotions with each other. They go side to side, shoulder to shoulder. Men bond like soldiers, like men will talk about the bonding they experience in war or on teams as like the deepest bond because there's a loyalty, there's people having your back. They don't require that conversation to bond. That's not where it comes from. And so when we go to a man and we're like, I'm feeling disconnected from him, we don't talk about anything. And we're like, how are you feeling? And he's like, what? So in my life, I used to do this when, we weren't connected. I'd go to my husband. Here I am, like, I'm a coach. I love the good questions. Like, I'm like the worst for that kind of stuff. I'm like, if you will tell me, everything, it will never be TMI for me. I'm like, it's fine. Tell me it all. And so I'm like, okay, I want to connect with my husband. I'm going to go ask him how he's feeling. And he would literally get irritated at me. What do you mean? I'm fine. I'm fine. I would be so hurt. Why is he just brushing me off when I'm coming with this genuine question? How are you feeling? Or I don't know, or I'm fine. Or when he's obviously not fine, right? It's fine. It's fine. And you're like, no. You're thinking clearly you're stressed to the max, and I'm trying to be your friend by letting you get it out. Men don't want you to help them get it out. They want to be with it themselves in silence and then later pretend like nothing happened. So when he does that to you after a fight, it's not because he doesn't care. That's how he moves on from difficult emotions. He does some internal processing, rationalizations, justifications, and then done. Shut the door on that one, slam. We are going back to normal now. And we as women see that as a deficit because it's not like women, but it is their strength. It's a different kind of strength.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it made me think about also when you have I'll use the term argument, but whatever.
Yeah, a discussion
that you don't agree on and you walk away separately. Oftentimes, I know I've experienced this and I've heard girlfriends who experience this, and it's kind of a joke where the guy can 3 minutes later be like, hey, babe, can you blah, 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 blah. And we're still thinking like, what do you mean, babe? Right? You're mad because you're still in it.
Yeah.
But to your point, he stepped away, he processed it, and he's over it.
Yeah.
And we're still thinking about it and wanting to talk about it.
Yeah. And so that is the biggest difference that I want all women to know is that talking about it more with a man makes it worse for the man. And it makes it worse for you too, because he never says the right stuff. And he knows he never says the right stuff, which is why he stops trying to say anything.
Yeah.
He's like, this is not going to help you. I'm going to say something. You're going to get more mad. You're going to keep talking more. We're never going to get out of this loop. And so he sits there with this, like, are you done face on, which pisses us off more. Right?
Yeah. So the advice then is to let it go that way. And if you really need to talk about it, I guess you have your good girlfriends, right? That you're gonna unload on and have those deep conversations with, and you have to use those people differently. He's just never gonna be that person who wants to have that deep discussion.
He's not your girlfriend.
And we're generalizing.
Yeah, he's not your girlfriend.
He's not our girlfriend.
We're generalizing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're generalizing. I just want to point that out. Of course, there's a guy here or there that might, but the typical.
You know what's amazed me though? I always thought, oh, but maybe there's these therapists who aren't like that. And, they're always, my brother is a therapist, right? The way he operates in his marriage is the same as every other man because it's his wife, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That dynamic.
That dynamic is created by the husband and wife thing, right? Just like how I remember I had guy friends when I was younger who'd say, you're so reasonable, you never complain, blah, blah, blah. And I said, that's because what you do is no consequence to me. If you were my husband, I would have a lot more to say about it, right? Yeah. So it heightens the intensity that you are in this partnership, in this lifelong thing. But what I don't want to say is that you can't have emotional intimacy with a man. So I'll tell you how you do it, okay? You don't ask questions, you make statements about yourself.
Give me an example.
Yeah. So say, your husband is off, right? And so your instinct is ask him questions, draw him out. That's going to annoy him. He doesn't want to be drawn out. The truth is you're having a feeling about that. Something is going on with you that is making you uncomfortable and you want to fix that emotion by enlisting him and fixing it. I'm going to get him to talk. I'm going to get him to look at me and we're going to fix it. But really, you just need to express what that emotion is, right? So my husband might be over there ignoring me to my mind. It's not ignoring me, but I feel like he's ignoring me. And so then when he comes around, I say, hey, honey, do you have a minute? And he says, okay, what? And you say, I'm just feeling a little weird right now. I'd love a hug, right? I make a statement, I make a request. I don't need to know what's going on for him, but he does need to know what's going on for me. And this is a polarity thing that is very politically incorrect, but will absolutely transform your marriage. Men don't want to tell you how they feel. They don't want to have a big self-expression, but the way they connect with you is by you revealing what's in there, just without expectation, without demand, without blame. I'm feeling off today, or I feel a bit sad. You don't have to have a reason. I'm just feeling kind of sad. He's like, why? I don't know. Can you just be here for a minute, or, put your arm around me, or can we go for a walk? A walk would make me feel better. So the work that I teach my women to do is spend enough time with yourself in silence or in journaling or with girlfriends that you know what you want. Because if you don't know, you can't even let him help you. It's like a help me, help you kind of thing, right? What could he do to make it better? We try to make it better through conversation, which is the feminine way of making things better. But men don't resonate with that, and they get impatient with it because it's confusing to them. And so they're like, why are we still talking? I really don't know what you want. They would love to make us happy. They would love to, be part of that, but we have to show them what that might look like.
I love the part of where you called out that when we notice something in them and we're trying to get to the bottom of that, I love the way you turned that around. Instead of trying to get in his head, what is it that we need to make that feeling that we're feeling go away? So yeah, I love that. And I think that's probably going to take some work and some practice. But even if people can just kind of think about that and stop themselves and say, wait, let me take a pause here. Let's not make it be that I need to figure him out. What do I need to get out of this feeling? Or what do I need to kind of change the situation around? And it will shift things just by looking at it through that lens. I like that. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk a little bit about, you sort of have this list of things women should stop doing.
Yeah.
Well, I made a list out of them, but so I want to run through them and have you talk to us a little bit about them. So one of the things is stop doing things you don't want to do. Start doing things that make you feel good. Mm-hmm. So talk to us about that distinction, because I think people do get caught up in the shoulda, woulda, coulda, or I have to, I should. These are the expectations. And I think that's what you're trying to get people away from.
Yeah. So in my life, it was being the good wife and the good mom. The good wife and the good mom cooks every meal from scratch 3 times a day. Her house is clean. Her kids are not wild animals, etc. And I couldn't do it. It was too tall an order. I didn't know it was because I hadn't had that role before. But when it came around, I was whipping myself and driving myself to achieve this goal, which made me miserable and resentful of my life and my role and my husband. And what I realized after the fact is he had nothing to do with that. I was my own judge, jury, and executioner. My husband was never really critical about stuff. He'll eat some hummus and carrots if I don't make lunch. So when I realized that I was being hard on myself, that a lot of my marital problems came from internal self-judgments, I went, okay, I don't have to do anything I don't want to do. There's no I have to in reality. That's just a made up brain thing. So if there's no I have to, what would I do? So then I got to go back to, okay, what are my values? Okay, the most important thing to me is food and healthy food. That's going to come above cleaning the house. The house has to be a little bit messy so people can have nice, healthy food. That's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to take pride in it. And I'm also going to let myself off the hook for lack of imperfection in other areas. And if there's a day where I'm just not in the mood, I'm not going to do it, because what my marriage needs is me at rest and in peace. It doesn't need a perfect house. It doesn't need perfect food. It doesn't need perfect children. It doesn't need perfection at all, right? And so by giving up that impossible standard, by giving up the shoulds, I was able to focus on the most important thing, which is my emotional well-being. But women know that they're important to their families, right? And they know that so many things hang on us. But if you get right down to the bottom of it, it's our emotional well-being, which is the linchpin of our community, women's emotional well-being. And so we really serve our families best when we make no apologies about putting our emotional well-being first.
I think the thought of looking at what we want to do, what makes us feel good instead of what we should, also talks to something that we talk about often, in that a lot of those shoulds aren't even ours. They came to us from, who knows, lots of places along the way, right? We picked them up in childhood. We saw them on TV. I don't know, a million different places. But most of those are the voices in our heads that lead us to believe we have to create these unrealistic expectations for ourselves. And once we can really realize that and shed them, I mean, it frees us up to really, like you said, get in touch with ourselves and then keep ourselves whole, which, again, your words, linchpin of it all is to make sure we feel whole, or else something is off kilter.
Right. Yeah. It's so freeing when you really realize that nobody can make you do anything and that you don't have to do anything, like to the point where you could walk out the door tomorrow and abandon everybody. I don't recommend it, but you need to recognize that that's your option so that you never get trapped, because women feel trapped when they're not trapped. We're not trapped. We are free, empowered Western women of means, of education.
Right.
We don't need to sit around calling ourselves trapped, but we do. But that's all in our heads.
Right. Right. We're trapped by our own means often.
Often, yeah.
So another stop that you talk about is stop blaming him for our unhappiness. Mm-hmm. And you kind of alluded to this a couple times already, but I do think it's something that you hear a lot of. We're miserable, or they're miserable, and it's because of the husband. So talk to us a little bit about that.
So one of the things that I think needs to be called out in our society is there's a real big blur between emotionally abusive relationships and normal relationship problems, right? If you have a really conflictual, aggressive, critical, mean man, that is going to take its toll on your mental health. And that's really hard to be resilient through. You can, but it's very, very difficult, right? And so people see that. And then when someone else says they're unhappy, they think it's the same thing. But generally, most people have what I call normal problems. And for women, it's people pleasing. That's our normal problem. So you might be at a certain age where you can have more freedom, right? So you're like, this is great. Want to travel, want to do this, want to do that. And your husband's a curmudgeon. He's sitting on a couch. And so then your story is, I can't even do what I want because my husband is so lame. Or, I'm not happy and I'm restricted because my husband doesn't support me.
Yeah.
My husband doesn't encourage my path. My husband won't co-sign. And when I hear that, I always hear the same thing. I can't tolerate any dissatisfaction in him, so I compromise myself every time.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's where the blame is. I'll say, woman, why don't you do this? They'll say, and this is the line that will tell it right away. I can't because he'll get mad. You can, and he will get mad.
Yeah.
Right?
Maybe, but yeah.
Yeah. If you know he's going to get mad,
say
you know him well enough, he's going to get mad. And no one will die. And your husband will be a little bit mad, right? We outsource our power so quickly because we haven't cultivated the ability to tolerate anger in a man, to tolerate dissatisfaction in a man. I really believe this is our instinctual wiring, because not long ago, we required a man to survive and our children to survive. So we get an emotional trigger really quick when a man is mad. He's bigger than us. Even if this man is the sweetest man who never hurt you, never touch you, I think there's a primitive part of our brain that is like, keep the men happy at all costs. And you see a group of women, right? A group of women will be in a house and the husband will walk in and they'll all shut up. Don't piss them off. Don't laugh too loud. We get nervous. We placate. It's not necessary for the most part. Men get mad and they get over it. So I always say it's better that he's mad at you than you're mad at him, because he'll probably get over it faster.
That's so true. That is so, so true. Back to my point earlier where we sort of ruminate in it and they're done with it.
Right. So say you want to take dance lessons and he doesn't want to go. And so you go by yourself and he's a little bit grumpy when you leave the house. He might have forgotten about it by the time you get back.
Yeah.
But if you don't do dance lessons because of his negativity, you're going to hold a grudge till the day you die.
Yeah.
And it's going to be this wedge in your marriage.
I think the other point, and you allude to it, is that it's not just about whether or not he'd get mad, because maybe that's not the statement. Maybe it's not that he would get mad, but I've heard people say, to your travel example, I thought we'd be traveling at this point in our lives, but he doesn't want to travel anymore. We did that early and now he just doesn't want to do it. So we don't get to travel. Well, and again, there's resentment.
Yeah.
Well, what do you mean you don't get to travel? Like, leave him on the couch and go travel, right? Maybe he's not even gonna get mad. Maybe that's not the situation. But I have still seen people who won't do it, won't pursue their dreams because, to your point, either he doesn't sign up to be part of it, but he's not even gonna be mad about it. But we choose to sort of stay by his side and do whatever he chooses to do instead of like deciding, okay, that's fine. You don't have to travel. I'm gonna go with a girlfriend. Or go by myself, all those things, right?
That's a very good point. It gets to the level where we project his anger or we project his disappointment. Like, I would be upset if he went traveling without me. So therefore, I should go traveling without him because he would be disappointed or silently lonely. We imagine deep into his psyche. It's like you said earlier about getting in his head. We need to get out of men's heads, just out of there.
Yeah.
If he does not express himself, it's not your responsibility. And if he does express himself, now you get to incorporate it. How am I going to take this self-expression? But we imagine stuff they're feeling and thinking. And again, we might do that for a woman because women are often tentative about expressing negative emotion with their friends, right? So we'll say, oh, do you want to meet me there? And the person will say, sure. And you'll say, well, maybe you don't want to meet me there. It's a long drive for you, isn't it? And they'll say, yeah, it actually is a long drive. So we do a lot of this kind of like preemptive digging into dissatisfaction for each other. And we need to not do that with men. Generally, if he says it, he means it. If he didn't say it, he didn't need to say it. And, just take it for face value, especially if he's offering something. Like if he says, hey, go ahead, go on a trip. Don't be like, are you sure? Are you sad? No, men hate that. They're like, I'm offering you freedom. I'm supporting you. Go and enjoy the hell out of yourself. Send pictures. Like men can be really magnanimous about living vicariously through you sometimes. They want their wife to be happy. A lot of them do. They're like, you know what? I don't want to do that stuff, but I love seeing her happy. That's what it's all about for them, right? And so, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I think more women need to take advantage of that, right? And just take those opportunities or realize that they can do it. And everybody will be happier. Back to your point about them having that mental health. I mean, that's going to support them having a solid mental health, right? It's going to make them feel very fulfilled.
Yeah, right.
So, okay, the last stop. So you hit on this a little bit. Let's call it out though. So stop being his maid. I really love that one. Mother, therapist, and instead create a thriving relationship. So I think most of us sign up for all of those roles, maid, mother, and therapist. And I think we've just talked about therapist quite a bit. Let's talk a little bit about the maid and the mother.
So the maid is in charge of course, house upkeep of every kind, right? Making sure the socks are ready, the underwear is ready. You can do that stuff if you feel inspired, but if you're doing it with resentment, you need to stop. That's how I always code it. If you can still feel love, if you're the kind of woman who's like, you know what, I like taking care of this stuff. This is how I show love. No problem. But if you're like, I've been doing this man's underwear for 30 years, you need to stop the underwear.
Yeah.
Because it's causing more problems than it's fixing. And the reason you don't have to be his maid is because he can do it. He's a grown man. If he runs out, and what women will say, if I didn't do it, he'd run out. Let him run out. Oh, well, he's a man. He lived on his own probably once, and he probably figured it out, right? And if he says, what happened to my underwear? You don't have to say, I've done it for 30 years. It's about time you did it once. Like, don't take that tack, but you can just pretend like it's nothing. You can say, you know what? I can't do it anymore. I just can't. I love you, but I can't do it anymore. And just let him figure it out. Like, that's the kind of easy attitude you have to have when you let go of stuff so that it doesn't become emotionally laden. So that's the main part, right? The maid is just, if you're going to cook, if you're going to clean, do it from love. And if you can't do that, take a breather on it. You might incorporate things later. That's what I found. I stopped making my husband lunch because it was stressing me out. And then I went later, you know what? Kids are a bit older. I got some time. Things are going great. I know he really loves it when I make his lunch. I'm going to make his lunch. And then I felt great about doing it. It was a totally different energy.
Well, you didn't feel like you had to at that point, right? You wanted to your point. I think that's really good. And this is a true story. A friend, we have a couple that we hang out a lot with, and we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago. There was this older couple, and the wife died, unfortunately. But the man was left, and he didn't know how to do his laundry, and he didn't know how to cook, and he didn't know. So he's trying to learn all these things at this point. But it's sort of a disservice that you don't have them do anything on their own ever in these long lasting marriages, because that is a true story and that could happen. So it's probably better if people can really fend for themselves. At least, they might not be the expert at any of those things, but at least they could get by. Same thing with women, right? We want to be able to do some of the basics of everything too. I think that's a well shared marriage. I think that lifts both sides up. But just a thought.
That's a really good point. It's a really good point that women want to know a little bit about the typically masculine jobs, like whatever it is your husband has carried for years. I've heard the same thing when people die. They go, I don't know how to do anything, whether it's the man or
Yeah.
the woman. They carried
Yeah.
that area and now I'm clueless about it. So even though the division of labor is very efficient, it can be very difficult if one person, suddenly is gone, which is terrible. But it made me think of the traveling example. Travel is a good way to do this. Go away for a little while. You're not telling him to do anything. He'll just have to figure it out, right? And then you kind of
Yes.
have these little opportunities. Not only that, you appreciate each other more.
Hmm.
Because then he's going to go, oh, yeah, she did all that stuff for me, which he's going to take for granted. We naturally do over the years take things for granted that are always done. So that's why I always say to women that this serve your man advice is unbalanced. There needs to be a stepping away. You need to be gone once in a while. He needs to fend for himself once in a while, because that's when he misses you. That's when he appreciates you. And then when you come back, there's a renewed energy of like, oh, this is my wife. Like, she's actually kind of great. She's not just like a fixture. She's not like the furniture in the house. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so just to close it out, the mother, I mean, a lot of the same things apply to the mother, right? I mean, cleaning up after them, making all their appointments, like just making sure they don't forget anything. I mean, those are all the mothering responsibilities I think we probably do to a degree that's not necessary.
Right. I think the mother to me is characterized by you're trying to mold a person, right? Children are who we train up to be a certain way, dress a certain way, talk a certain way, greet guests a certain way. And you'll hear women saying, he's rude at restaurants. He doesn't talk to people right, like, and they'll try to teach him, like, you can't do that. Can't say those things, honey. Like, stop, and they're treating him as though he doesn't know how to act. They do. Let's teach you the ways, husband, right? Which is what you do with a child, appropriately with a child, right? And criticism is a big part of the mother role, right? It's the hen pecking, right? That's the
Yeah.
traditional term for it. A little bit of this, hey, don't do this, don't do that, stop that, pick this up, coaster it, slide it under. Like, it's the constant nitpicking of every way that he is. And the mother one, I'm glad you brought it up last, because the mother is the killer of passion. Because energetically, your mother is unsexy. It's supposed to feel unsexy about your mother. Also, your son is unsexy. It's supposed to feel unsexy. So when we fall into the mother role, as we have all done, no shame, it's a big part of our identities for a lot of years. But when we fall into that, and then we wonder why our husbands don't have the same spice and desire for us, that is why almost all the time.
That's good food for thought, because I'm sure that I don't think that would come naturally, that people would think about that, but that makes sense. And you take on a different role. I think sometimes that comes up when you're caretaking for somebody too, right? It's sort of you then become a different role and they see you differently. So I could see how that would apply in the same way. That's really interesting. So talk to us a little bit about some of the tricks maybe that you teach when you're working with somebody about just trying to kind of keep things spiced up and keep things, on a fun playing field, because life gets busy, especially when you have the younger kids. I think, for people with, grandchildren, they're in their sort of second phase. It's a little bit different. But for those that have younger families, it can get really hectic and it's really hard to connect sometimes because there's not a lot of time. Do you have some suggestions there?
Yeah, so I love that question, because when I was in a hard place in my marriage, I kept reading, you need to have date nights, right? You need to have date nights. You need to have all this quality time. And I'm going, that is really kind of impossible right now. Of course, we could have done things differently, but I'm like full-time breastfeeding, etc. Like it just was not a reality. And it was really depressing for me to hear that that was necessary to create romance. And now I realize it's not necessary. It's beneficial. You should do it if you can, but it won't create romance on its own. And the reason that I really want to emphasize this, is some people will be having a hard time and they'll go on a date and their date will be so flat that they come home feeling worse than when they went out, right? because they were relying on the circumstance to create romance, a nice restaurant, a weekend away. And circumstances don't create romance. They don't. And when we go and we wait for the fireworks to come, we're sorely disappointed. And that's because what creates chemistry is how you feel about yourself, your thoughts and feelings about yourself, times your thoughts and feelings about your husband. So if I feel like a sexy, vivacious, alive, vibrant woman, like I probably remember years ago feeling, or before kids or whatever, which you create by what we talked about, doing things you love, taking care of your mental health, really dancing, like leaning into the energies that turn you on. Like you can turn on your own life by yourself. And you need to do that if you're trying to reignite a marriage. You as the woman have to become, I call it the lover, like that woman who is playful, is flirty, just like enjoys herself, takes a joke, like flirt with the cashiers. You can practice this by doing it with everyone, because your husband is kind of high stakes. It can be hard to like muster the courage, but it really isn't about him. It's about your identity and your common habits and behavior. I always think about when you first date someone and you go grocery shopping, it's very romantic, right? Oh, I just love doing everything with you. I love even grocery shopping with you, right? And that's because of your energy. It's just grocery shopping. All of a sudden, when you're married, you're like, oh, all we do is grocery shop. And it's like, well, it's not the grocery shopping. It's the energy that you bring to it, which is disappointed, which is tired, which is victimy, which is looking for someone else to give you a buzz. You're not bringing any buzz. Someone please give me a hit. I need some drugs. Like we get that way where we're seeking. That's why people get in affairs, right? They're desperate for some buzz, and then somebody else flirts with them and they're like, oh, there it is. Thank God, right? But you can create that energy by cultivating it in yourself. Now, the second part of it is you need to think about the ways you admire and appreciate your husband. Like you need to cultivate a list of that stuff. Because if you're thinking about the things that irritate you all the time, how much chemistry are you going to have? You're going to be like, well, he's kind of annoying and he's got all these faults and he's a man. He's going to have faults just like we do. So it's just a matter of focusing on the admiration and the appreciation and then speaking it to him regularly. Men, when they feel appreciated, blossom. So that's that one about bringing out the best in him. If you just appreciate him a lot, he will become a different man. Like it's so big for them. Everybody needs appreciation, but it's like even bigger than you can imagine as a woman, what a difference it makes for them. So what happens when you do this is that you start to feel good when you see them, and they start to feel good when they see you. And it's that little anticipation. It's that moment of, oh, he's coming. Oh, yay. That is chemistry. It's the belief that that person will bring you pleasure somehow. And so that's what I love. My work is all focused on, you can be in the kitchen, kids are nuts, or, grandkids are nuts, or maybe nobody's around and it's quiet and you can turn on some tunes and start dancing and being silly. And all of a sudden it's like, we've got a great life. Look what we've created together. Let's vibe on that. Let's remember all we've done.
I love those two things because they tie into everything we talked about. So the noticing the good things or the things you appreciate in your spouse, I think we often talk about trying to live in a life of gratitude and noticing the positive things, because once you start noticing the positive things, and some days it's the smallest thing, like I was able to get out of bed, right? But whatever, there's always something positive. And the more you focus on those things, you see more of those things and less of the negative things. And it's the exact same concept. Focus on and pull out the positives and you will find more positives. And when you start really thinking about those and acknowledging those, I know your point about you'll see a difference in the behavior and the relationship. I've personally experienced that. It's true. It works. And then the going back to sort of the, having fun and being playful and all those things, it ties back into don't rely on someone else to make you happy. Or even external things. It's find that happiness within yourself. Find things that light you up. Lean into those things. And they may not include your husband. It may be, like you said, go get dance lessons, go travel, go do whatever. But you're going to be happier. You're going to be more playful. And then suddenly you're a different person that's standing there and he's going to be more attracted to that. So I love that because it kind of ties back into everything. One thing I wanted to hit on, and I know we're getting close to time, but I definitely wanted to hit on so people understand this because I'm not sure I knew the difference. But can you just touch really quick on the difference between being a coach, a relationship marriage coach, versus being a counselor? Because I could imagine people coming to it, and I'm sure that's why you address this. People saying, "Well, why do I need you? Why wouldn't I go to a counselor? With somebody with a degree in counseling." And I loved your explanation of that, and I think it makes a ton of sense. Can you share that?
Yes, that's a great question. Thanks for asking it. So, a therapist will give you tools to navigate your inner world, right? They'll process with you, they'll soundboard with you. They will not give advice. They will not share their personal life at all. They're not supposed to. They might a little bit, but they're not supposed to. And they kind of do this blank slate thing with you, this mirroring stuff. And it's very valuable to feel heard. It's very valuable to just express stuff that needs to be expressed. I love therapy. Coaching is about reaching a new level. It's like having an athletic coach. It's like, I want to win this next championship, or I want to get to the Olympics. And I don't know how to do that on my own. I'm pretty good. I'm an athlete already. But if I get that coach who I know is really good at teaching people how to run just a little faster, I might shave some time off. And when you hire a coach, they tell you what to do sometimes. They're like, you're going to practice this many times this week. I give people little assignments, appreciate your husband. Let's do a checklist. See if you can do it like 20 times this week, We kind of have, it's like training. Because you made the point that these are new skills and habits, and they don't just happen. It's not easy to create new skills and habits on your own. Like, that's why you get a trainer at the gym, because you know how to lift a weight. But are you going to do it? Hard to do it. Really hard to do it by yourself, right? And so the way I look at it is that the people who come to me, they've usually done some therapy. They've seen a few things. They understand the power of your own mind, and of your own intention. But they have some blind spots and they have some frustrations in their relationship that they just do not know how to navigate. And so they're like, okay, I'm ready to have a really amazing love that I've always dreamed of, not just okay. I want it to be rich and deep. And that's what Shiloh does, right? That's what a love coach does. It's like, I want to have the love affair I dreamed of. Now, I don't sell fantasies. He's not going to be perfect, and you're not going to be perfect. But I think we all know that's what love is. It's not perfection. It's being together and delighting in each other and being grateful for each other and being thankful that you have each other, instead of divorce is expensive and, not just making the strategic calculations about why you should be loyal, but being happy and ready for that empty nest and looking forward to it. So yeah, that's what a coach does. And then the other part I was going to say is coaches share their own story. I share my own story a ton with people because it's mentorship. So I'm like, this is how I got to where I was. These are the steps I took. This is how my husband responded, right? So they kind of have a real life visual of what they might see when they try it out. And that gives you so much more confidence to do it. You're not just like, is this going to work? Is it going to blow up in my face? Is this going to be a lot of effort with no change? That's a lot of the reasons why we don't try new stuff in our marriages when they're kind of okay. But I'll be there going, hey, you did it. Did you see that change that happened? And they'll go, oh my God, it happened, and then you kind of get this momentum going it's the most fun thing in the world. I love it.
Yeah, I'm sure it's very rewarding. I always think too that it's sort of a shortcut, right? It's like sometimes we know the things that need to happen. We're not exactly sure how to put them into action, but we can find somebody that's been through that same situation, and that sort of gives us the cheat sheet. You don't have to do all the research and the legwork to figure all the pieces out. Somebody already put them together for you, and so here's the map, and that's a little bit of a shortcut. So something good to think about. So before we wrap, I want to give you an opportunity on any main points that I didn't get out there that you typically like to share. Is there anything I forgot to mention that you want to bring up just to leave people with, or do you think we got the highlights of it?
You did a fantastic job. I really liked how you tied the threads together. Gratitude is that super skill in life that makes it's the biggest bang for your buck in any category, is really disciplining yourself with gratitude. So I love that you highlighted that. No, I think this idea of creating, from within the emotions you want to have so that you can create a new dance with your husband, you really focused on that. And the reason that I want to say that as the last thing is because our instinct is to go, he's like this, so I can only have that. He's got these limitations and those capacities. So I think our marriage has kind of hit its ceiling. It's okay, right? But when you realize, hey, maybe I haven't hit my ceiling. Maybe I got more in here. Maybe I got a different bag of tricks I haven't even tapped into, right? Ooh, that's kind of exciting. And now you end up in this limitless potential because you're a conscious being who's tapping into your own limitless potential. And so that's the hope I love to spread. Don't just look at your husband and what he can and can't do. Be like, well, what if I could do different stuff? That would create a different marriage.
Yeah, I love that so much. And again, to take it up a level and take it to be more globally, it goes back to how many of us spent most of our years or a lot of our years looking for those external validations, those external, whether it's the job or making a certain amount of money or having the family and house with the picket fence, all the things to make us happy, only to hopefully at one day, which most of this group is, at a place where they realize none of that mattered. None of that mattered. It won't make me happy, just like he won't make me happy. I have to make me happy. And when you get to that point, you can change and shift everything so much and just lift yourself to a whole different place. It's phenomenal.
Yes, I love that.
Great job. Thank you so much for talking with me today. I know that everybody's going to enjoy it, and we'll put all your links and let people know how to follow you and get in touch with you on the show notes. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Thanks for this chat. This was wonderful.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review, as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.